Hello and welcome to another Room 420. Today I am with my good friend, my homegirl, Rachel Finley. She is with New Era Group at Your Castle Real Estate. She's also basically another Renaissance woman. We have so many people who are so talented on the show. Actress, also costumer. Just want to throw that out there. My good friend. We have Lo, our content manager. We have so many questions for the real estate person in our room. We were pretty jacked about this, weren't we?
Yes, absolutely.
So we were like, okay, how does this affect? We kind of had so many questions. We're like, all right, we should write these down and kind of go in there before we get like a little too weird. You know what I mean? So like Lo had some questions we were going to ask Rachel, and Rachel's going to answer them the best she can to kind of help you guys who are listening. If you're interested in real estate, you're trying to buy a home, there's kind of something for everybody. Like also if you're in the cannabis industry. So Rachel's going to try and help that out. So let's ask our first question we got.
Okay, the first question I had for you is, how do HOAs and marijuana work?
Okay, so HOAs for any kind of regulation gets to kind of decide what they want to do. I will say there is a majority of HOAs in the state that have made laws and regulations about who can like grow in the homes that they are over, who can smoke in their homes. So there are quite a few. You just really need to like make sure if you're moving into a place what the laws are. I would say make sure your agent, if you're with an agent, will give you the guidelines and make sure you really go through them. I think they're a little bit less than they used to be because I think some of the HOAs have started to understand that it's just a nature of, being a legal state, and there are a lot of people that like to partake in marijuana. So I think it's, HOAs, it just really depends on which one it is. They all get to make their own laws and regulations. I say, like I said, Colorado, I think is probably a little bit more lenient than some places. And it definitely is more lenient in states where it's legal recreationally. That's a hard word, recreationally.
Right.
Because I think they understand that it's kind of like, if you're going to have a backyard barbecue, most likely in the state where it's legal, you might have one or two people who are going to want to do that rather than have a beer or something like that.
Right.
So it's hard to answer that like generally. It really just depends on.
Okay, so it's individually, it's based on the individual HOA basically.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I would say like the best bet if you are in an HOA, you want to like change those laws, and this is for any like regulation.
Good luck.
But I tell people not necessarily like what your best bet is to get on the board.
Oh, okay.
And that way you can kind of from within change those regulations.
Take over.
And that goes with any regulation you have on an HOA, but I think most likely for that, because most likely there are other people in your community that feel the same way you do. But if you don't have a voice on the board, then you're never going to change anything.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. The second question I had, how do you get a mortgage if you work in the cannabis industry?
That one is a little complicated. I did have a conversation with my lender about that. And luckily, because it's been in Colorado for so long, most lenders have kind of workarounds because federally it is still illegal. So you cannot apply for federal loans. So you won't be able to have an FHA loan. You won't be able to have a VA loan. But they will be able to find you workarounds of other kinds of loans and programs for you that can help. There's also things that are called bank statement loans that aren't based on your W-2s. They're based on your bank statement. So they just see how much money you have in your bank, and that's how they do the loan. But I'd say the best bet is to find a good lender. And usually if you have a good agent, they'll be able to connect you with a good lender. And any lender worth their salt in Colorado especially is going to be able to find a loan that works for you.
Okay.
The general rule for any industry is you have to have worked in it for 2 years.
Okay.
And a lot of the time, if you are just an employee of like a dispensary or a grow house or something like that, it's a little bit easier for you to kind of work those workarounds and get the loan. It's a little bit harder for the business owners. But generally, if they have a very successful business, they are able to maybe work it as like a cash deal and things like that, so you don't have to worry about the mortgage.
This might be a dumb question, but is there a difference between the lenders being like a credit union or like an actual bank by any chance?
It's really, it depends on the bank. I would say locally owned banks probably are going to be a little bit more willing to work with someone working in the industry. The banks that are federally backed and federally insured are still going to have to deal with that. So it's just kind of a case by case basis.
Okay.
I would say it would be easier instead of going through banks. It would be easier to go through a lender because a lot of lenders don't work for specific banks or institutions.
Okay.
They will kind of shop around what would be your best option.
Okay.
So they have what's called originators, and those are the ones that fund the loans. So they can kind of go to each person.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, a lender is way better, at least in this instance, than a bank would
A
be.
bank.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Dope. Oh, and then is there any difference between like commercial and real estate versus like buying a home? Being a marijuana user.
Yeah,
or
it just
in the industry at all.
it's I think again it's kind of a case by case. A lot of the time we have seen for commercially that it's more cash.
Gas.
Like cash purchases where like I don't know where that word
It was like Mad Max right now. We're like, give me the gasoline.
It's more like cash. A lot of grow houses and things like that will outright buy their facilities.
Okay.
So they don't have to worry about those kinds of things. They don't have to worry about landlords and things. Most people don't want to deal with landlords anyway. So I think that's usually what happens. Again, I think it's just get a good lender. They're going to be able to work with you and just make sure you're a good tenant if you're going to be leasing. I think that's the biggest thing, and kind of get to know. I think for anyone who's going to have a landlord, maybe do your research beforehand and make sure they align with what your values and what you're wanting to do.
Yeah.
So that you don't run into issues later on.
That's a good point. So speaking of landlords, are medical marijuana patients protected under any of the fair housing laws?
That is a really interesting question. And I don't know what the right answer for that is, but my guess would be because the fair housing laws are federal laws, that it kind of falls under the same umbrella as mortgages, that because it's federally illegal, I don't think those apply. Unfortunately, I don't know if that would hold up in a court in Colorado. I don't know if a judge would, a state judge would look at it and be like, it's legal here. It's becoming more legal and more, common around the country.
Yeah.
So it's really just up to interpretation. But I think if you pushed a case higher and higher, it would get to a point where a federal judge would have to be regardless. Over. Yeah, it's a federal law. So.
Oh, man.
I know. It's hard.
All right. So my last question was, does marijuana typically drive up or drive down property value?
So there actually last year was a big study around the country with an organization called NARE, which is the National Association of Realtors. And they kind of polled all of the realtors around the country in states where marijuana was illegal, and states where it was legal just medically, and states where it was legal medically and recreationally. And they did find that the states that had legalized both medically, and I cannot say this word for some reason, recreationally, there we go, I did it. They said property values will go up in states where it is legal. They go up about $17,000 to $20,000 per year in states where marijuana is legal. And in addition to that, they find if there is a dispensary that is put in a neighborhood, property values immediately around there will go up $500.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I did not know that.
It's crazy. And part of the reason, so they kind of were like, well, why is this? It can't just be because people want to come and smoke weed.
Right.
There has to be other. So part of it is a new industry that people will come into the state and the city for jobs, for new opportunities, things like that. It also has to do with because most of the states will take revenue and tax revenue from the industry and put it back into schools and infrastructure and things like that. It makes the states where it's legal and they're able to use that more desirable places to live.
That's amazing.
So it's actually, I was actually kind of shocked when I started researching. I was like, I didn't imagine that it would make property values go down, but I didn't imagine it would make them go up as much as it does.
I didn't even think about that at all. So that's cool. No, thank you for your insight.
Is there certain zoning restrictions with that, neighborhoods too, or do you know anything about that?
There are certain counties I know, and I don't know if this is still true, but I know in the last few years, Douglas County is one that will not allow dispensaries. So I think it's just again based on the counties and things. I don't know if there's zoning. I just looking around at where dispensaries have been put in places like Jefferson County and Denver County. I don't imagine there is.
Yeah.
I know there's some restrictions on personal growing and things like that. But I think now, because it's been legal for so long and they've kind of worked out the kinks of that and how dispensaries work and things, I think it's kind of just like a normal business of you just lease where you want to be and, you know, make sure you're nothing illegal is happening, like with any business, and you're good to go.
There was something I think I wanted to talk to you about was like if somebody was growing at their house or like somebody was using a house as a grow, how has that kind of affected that house too?
So the biggest problems that people run into with grow houses is they say the smell, which I've never experienced, but that's what people have said, and then the moisture that it takes to do growing successfully. So it's not necessarily a detriment to selling your house. It's just something that you need to be aware of and let your agent know so that they can kind of mitigate. Say if like there is a lot of moisture, they can bring the right people in to take care of that. They can bring the right people in to kind of take out the grow if they need to. It is something that you have to be aware that if your agent is going to have to disclose it to buyers. We are legally obligated to disclose any what they call like detrimental things of a home. But that's the same as if the roof had hail damage and wasn't repaired. And I would imagine most people in Colorado who have been used to it for a while, it's not going to be a reason that someone's not going to buy a house. As long as you like, you know, I might recommend if I was having someone like a buyer wanting to buy a house that I knew was a grow house to be like, well, when we do inspection, we'll just pay more like close attention to, you know, making sure there's no mold or like water damage. Otherwise it should be fine. So, and it kind of goes back also to those of the HOA. There are a lot of regulations with HOAs on if you can have grow in your home. So. And
that's something I kind of wanted to circle back on because I think I know a lot of people do home grows and sometimes we'll just leave stuff for the new buyers, you know, when they're like, I need to get this out of my house or, you know.
And I think, you know, it's kind of a fun thing. Like it's like everything in when you have sellers and buyers like exchanging houses. I know all of us who have sold a house have like been like, I don't want to move this like ugly chair that's in the back room, so now I'm just gonna leave it for the next person. I say that like most people who at least have grown up in Colorado or have been here for a while are not going to be super shocked if they find things to grow in the home. Like I don't think it's going to be, and most likely they'll know before, and so it's not, you know, I mean it's just it's plants, so you're gonna find what a pot and like like a garden
find in your
hose
backyard.
I was like, and even then they're like, okay, well, now it got free, you know, it's a benefit, right?
I think that's remarkable too. Just talking about that property value fact. That's something I was kind of interested too with like how are we competing with like new markets that are opening up too? Is that gonna kind of drive us down like say neighboring states or something like that too?
It might. I imagine as it continues to get legal in other places in the country, it's going to just kind of even out. The nice thing about Colorado and Denver is that we have a ton of other things that are driving people to want to live here. So I think our appreciation is going to continue no matter what. And it doesn't seem like the states around us are in a super big hurry to legalize. So I think that might be a thing we might see in the future. But we have a great metro area. We have a lot of outdoor activities. So it's like, on top of all the other things we have that people like, the legalized weed is just kind of a bonus. Like, not to diss on neighboring states, but like Nebraska's probably not going to have the same, you know, they don't have the outdoor amenities we have. They don't have the metropolitans. Exactly. So it's definitely a benefit for us on top of all of the other things we have. So,
definitely icing on the cake.
And I mean, most of the places I'm like trying to list off that like Washington and Oregon, all of the places I can think of at the top of my head that are legal are already they were already great places to live beforehand anyway. So I don't think people are going to like go out in droves and move to Oregon from Colorado. I'm trying to think of any other state I can think of it when they legalize it. People are going to be peace Colorado. I think
we were talking kind of about the East Coast before kind of our conversation before the podcast about New York, and I know that market's kind of going to be big. Next year's like they're predicting about 33 billion, I think, in just like Connecticut like alone or something like that. And I could be totally talking off my butt right now, but it's a huge amount of money. So I'm just kind of curious, you know, if that starts to really pick up too, with how that's going to affect that market as well. And I know you're licensed here in Colorado, but we both have talked about how we love New York too, and like how that's going to affect it.
I think it might, honestly, because it's so expensive out there, and I know there's been a lot of people that have moved out of the East Coast because of the expense, I think it might actually help because, again, it brings a new industry in, it brings a new way to be employed. It just injects like more life, I think, into a market because it's a brand new industry in places that have just legalized that hasn't been there before. And you need people that know what they're doing. You need people that have experience in it, and you need people to work at those industries. So I think it's actually probably going to inject new life over there, and people that may have left during the pandemic may go back, especially if they've moved to places like Colorado or, you know, Oregon and all that. Yeah. And that's, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see, and we already seen that it does increase property values, so it could go either way, but I think it would probably definitely help inject new life into places that may have seen a lot of decrease in population just from increase of, you know, cost of living and all that.
We'll have better weed, though. That's what I'm trying to
we've nailed it already, so.
And I'm curious, too. Do you see a lot of overlap with, like, commercial and I guess home real estate? Is there a difference in approach with each one?
So I will say most agents will kind of choose to specialize in one or the other. There's very few agents that will do both. I haven't seen much overlap for me personally. I'd have to say, like, if you're in the industry, I know it would probably affect where you'd want to live. Because there's, you know, where the grow houses are, where you're working at. If you're working in a grow house or at a dispensary and stuff, it's going to affect where you want to live. So, you know, I don't think a lot of people would want to live in Douglas County who want to work at dispensaries. Maybe not. I could be wrong. I'm not super familiar with commercial, but I know, like, there's a lot of, like, I have an agent in my brokerage right now who was looking at homes with clients, and she came across this big warehouse that someone was trying to sell, and she's like, oh, I know, like, my ex-boyfriend does grow houses. I'm sure he would love. So, like, they connected, and it just was kind of like a normal deal. There's really not a lot of, like, difference in how things go. Like I said, I think we've kind of had to learn throughout the last years. We have one of the longest contracts of any real estate in the country. Like, our contract is almost, I think, 17 to 23 pages, depending on how many amendments you put in it. So we have most everything covered in it. There's not a lot of things that are left out or that can be kind of left up to chance in the transaction in Colorado. So you just got to make sure you have a good agent who kind of knows what's going on. And I know there's agents that specialize in just marijuana industries and finding, you know, places for dispensaries and grow houses and things like that. And they will know if that's what you're looking for, like, you can get connected with those people and they will know exactly what to do for you.
I'm just kind of curious too, because I think we've seen a movement in people like Sprinter vans, all kinds of stuff, you know, and like, to me, it's like, you know, I see a warehouse, I'm like, yeah, that's where I want to live and work. You know, like, how do you figure that out? Really? All right, that's the grow room, that's my video game room, that's the basketball court, you know. Yeah, that's my office.
So you'd have to, like, it's such a weird, especially in older areas of, like, different stuff, like, between what is commercial and what is real estate. It comes down to zoning, but it's also like, you can easily, I don't want to say easily, that's the right word. But you can change zoning if you need to. And you can, like, if you buy something with cash, you can basically turn it into whatever you want because you own it outright. Obviously you have to follow the local laws and all those things and figure out regulations. But again, I think it all just comes back to, it has been legal for so long in Colorado. If you are experiencing an issue or problem, someone else has experienced before you, and there is a solution. So it's very nice that we've had this time to figure it out. We're not back at the beginning when we're like, how do we do this? Like, we've had the time to figure it out and figure out the regulations and the pitfalls and things that you need to watch out for.
Okay. So I think this would be fun to do with you, is just, like, look at dollar estate bids and just see which ones you would advise me to buy.
Turning into a real estate conversation. Hey, sure.
Yeah. I think there's so much to, like, not just cannabis, but, like, real estate. I think that, like, listeners can definitely pick on it. I hope we're able to, like, have Rachel on again. Yes. You know, in the future where it's like, oh, I didn't know this, you know, and stuff like that. Because we are two brains here. Well, 1.5. I do my best. So we definitely try to come up with the best questions possible, you know. So I really appreciate you coming on today and kind of just talking about, real estate. And there's so many other things I love talking to you about where I'm like, hey, let's talk about Lord of the Rings right now. We could go on for hours. But
talk to me about Harry Potter and I will never stop.
Yeah. Which we'll have you back on. We're like, which character do you think smokes pot, But I want to thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you, Rachel. Check her out, New Era Group at Your Castle Real Estate. Is there anything else we should know?
I don't think so. I think, if you're looking for any real estate needs, please hit me up. I'd love to answer questions. I promise I will not pressure you into anything. I'm not that kind of person. I just want to help. And I know it's a difficult, hard thing to navigate by yourself. So yes. I've done it before I was an agent, so I get it. And thanks for having me on. And I hope, if there's any more questions, I'd love to come back and answer more. I'd love to bring a lender in here to answer questions about getting mortgages and how that works. I'm sure they would have better insight than I do. So thanks for having me.
And your problem, I'll just open up like, tell me about your childhood, something like that.
What are your traumas?
So thank you so much, guys. Hey, and thank you guys for listening. This has been Room 420. Be sure to follow us at Veriheal for the latest cannabis news.